when we were sitting there on set during the November election and we were talking about the Mamdani victory and we were talking about the Spanberger victory, and she won by a massive freaking margin and won parts of the state, red parts of the state. Well, she hasn't sat down for a big interview. I went down, I said not up, but down to the governor's mansion this morning and talked to her about all sorts of things.
Great.
And yeah, it's just interesting to hear from somebody about her style of leadership and governing at a time where I think people are looking for new leaders in this country, to say the least.
Yeah, and she's got a very interesting situation there with Democratic majorities in state legislature. A lot of legislation she's signed, a lot that she's vetoed in a state that she won by a big margin, but is not, California or New York. So I'm curious to hear what she has to say.
We talked about all of it. We talked for too long to show on the show, so we will post the whole thing on YouTube as well later this evening. But have a great weekend. I will see you next week.
See you next week.
Okay, it is Friday, and it has been, another absolutely nuts week in the era of Trump and exhausting and all of the things. So why don't I show you something that will actually make you feel good? Doesn't that feel good? I mean, this was the scene at the Kennedy Center today where people gathered to watch construction crews put up scaffolding that they'll use to remove Donald Trump's name from the side of the building. And it comes, of course, after a federal judge ruled Trump's decision to just add his name to the Kennedy Center was illegal and ordered his name to be removed by today. And it wasn't just local onlookers, though there are many, many of them who came to see the show in Washington, D.C. Over the course of the day, hundreds of thousands of people tuned into an MSNOW live stream to watch a construction crew prepared to remove that tacky symbol of Trump's insecure demand to have his name plastered everywhere across Washington, D.C. Now, in total so far, nearly 3 million people have watched that single live stream today. Nearly 3 million people. And they haven't even started taking the name off yet. This is literally watching scaffolding being put up. If that doesn't tell you how people feel right now about Trump and how much they hate the sight of his name on institutions they care about, I don't know what does. But that name will come off that building tonight. And all show long, we're just going to have a little live stream in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. So if they start to take that name off, you'll be the first to know. So that's a pretty fun thing happening tonight, right? How about I tell you, because you've digested the good thing, about some things that will make you feel simultaneously outraged? Because today has also been a very good day for Donald Trump's billionaire buddies. Tonight, we got the news that the Trump Justice Department has approved Paramount's $111 billion deal to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery. That means 2 major movie studios, 2 major streaming services, CNN and CBS News, will now all be under one roof. And all of it will be controlled by David Ellison, the son, of course, of MAGA billionaire Larry Ellison. Now, did paying $16 million to settle a completely bogus lawsuit over a Kamala Harris interview, installing Barry Weiss at CBS News, gutting 60 Minutes, and firing Stephen Colbert help grease the wheels a little bit? Who knows? I think you know. But what we do know for sure is that it was a big day for the Ellison boys. So I'll just let you digest that news for a moment as I show you this other headline that is going to be rage-inducing from the Wall Street Journal. Because Elon Musk is officially the world's first trillionaire. That's right, the same guy who hacked away at the federal government with a literal chainsaw. Yep, remember that when that happened, that crazy thing on the stage? The guy who made massive cuts to U.S. foreign aid, cuts that Harvard School of Public Health estimate have led to hundreds of thousands of deaths around the globe. The same guy whose monstrous creation, the Department of Government Efficiency, is accused of illegally accessing Americans' sensitive Social Security data. The same guy who sent an email to more than 2 million federal workers telling them to justify their job or be fired. The same guy who campaigned and spent hundreds of millions of dollars to get Trump elected while he was reportedly, and this detail is, well, so high on ketamine that it was affecting his bladder, all of which he strongly denied. The same guy who let his merry band of 20-something tech bros run around firing career civil servants, cutting social safety nets, and wrecking the government without reducing the federal deficit or producing any discernible benefit to the country whatsoever. I mean, just listen to the way one of those Doge bros described their work in a sworn deposition.
You don't regret that people might have lost important income to support their lives?
Objection.
No. I think it was more important to reduce the federal deficit from $2 trillion to close to zero.
Right. Did you reduce the federal deficit?
No, we didn't.
So you weren't able to reduce the deficit, and you still don't regret that people lost some of their livelihood based on your actions?
Objection.
No.
First of all, is the guy we just showed there cutting benefits like 12 and a half? I mean, what is even happening there? But basically, sure, people lost their livelihoods, and sure, they completely failed to achieve the most fundamental thing they set out to do. But somehow, that 12-and-a-half-year-old looking kid thinks it was all worth it. And now Elon Musk, the guy responsible for all of that chaos and insanity, has just become the world's first ever person to be worth $1 trillion, with a T, trillion. Because today Elon Musk took his space and AI company SpaceX public, allowing investors to buy shares of the company on the stock market. And the company started out at an enormous valuation of $1.77 trillion and shot up through the course of the day to a market value of over $2 trillion as the trading day went on. Now, the origin story of how we got here is very worth remembering, because part of the reason Elon Musk companies were able to become so successful in the first place is because they received a ton of government subsidies, investments, and contracts. And that money was especially crucial to Musk's companies in their earliest days, when their success was far from a sure bet. Without a critical taxpayer-funded investment during a very precarious time for Tesla, it may not have survived at all. And likewise, the financing and contracts that SpaceX received from the federal government in its early years were absolutely vital to making it the company it has now become. So the federal government that Musk took his chainsaw to was the same federal government that enabled that guy to become the world's richest man by the massive margin we see today. But despite how far Musk's SpaceX has come, a lot of people still question whether the company is really worth $2 trillion. I mean, the financial research firm Morningstar estimated that the space part of SpaceX, the part of the company that actually launches rockets and builds starships, has an estimated value of just over $600 billion. That's a lot, but it's nowhere near its supposed $2 trillion market value. According to SpaceX, the rest of its value comes from the artificial intelligence part of the company called xAI, which is currently losing money. It lost about $2.5 billion in the first quarter of this year. So investors are betting on money losing AI, betting on the money losing AI part of Musk's company. That's basically what's happening here. You know, the one that made a chatbot go rogue and start calling itself Mecha Hitler. Remember that? They think that part of the company is eventually going to become way more valuable than the part of his company that sends rockets into space. So there's that. So how did Musk convince so many people to buy into that idea today? Well, first, Trump's SEC loosened some of the rules for brokerage firms, making it easier for people to buy into SpaceX. Musk then decided to set aside an unusually large portion of SpaceX's publicly traded shares for retail investors, which basically means regular people who buy and sell their own stock. As the Wall Street Journal puts it, those investors are much less likely to scrutinize Musk's business plans and much more likely to buy into Musk's hype about things like putting AI data centers in space. So basically, Elon Musk is essentially relying on his army of loyal fans to help make him rich. But he's also relying on a big investment from someone else, you, or many of you. Let me explain. So the stock market has these things called index funds. You've probably heard of them. They track the major indexes like the S&P 500 or the Dow. And index funds are basically a way of bundling investments in a bunch of established companies rather than picking and choosing them individually. So if you have a 401k or a pension, it's probably invested in an index fund or two. Typically, a company has to be listed on the stock market for around a year before it can be included in one of those index funds. It's essentially a safeguard in order to protect people's investments. But earlier this year, Reuters revealed that Musk's company told NASDAQ that they would have to shorten that waiting period for SpaceX if NASDAQ wanted to list their stock on their exchange. NASDAQ then changed their rules to allow companies like SpaceX to be included in the NASDAQ 100 just a few weeks after going public. So what does all of that basically mean? Well, it means that in just a few short weeks, millions of Americans' retirement funds and pension plans are going to be invested in SpaceX all at once. So you may end up boosting Elon Musk's net worth, whether you like it or not, whether you want to or not. In many ways, the SpaceX IPO is the perfect example of how the Trump-era economy works. Basically, rich people with power and influence can change the rules so they get richer, while regular people, taxpayers and pensioners, are left holding the bag. It's absolutely infuriating. But here's the good news. Democratic lawmakers are fed up with it and demanding change. And I'm not just talking about progressives like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who have long called for cracking down on the ultra-wealthy. I mean, today I sat down for a wide-ranging interview with Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger, a standard bearer for the center of the Democratic Party. In just 6 months in office, she's done a lot. I mean, she's signed into law paid family and medical leave protections. She's signed into law legislation raising the minimum wage and a package of maternal health bills meant to lower costs and improve health care. But when we sat down this morning, she also expressed a whole lot of outrage over the corruption and self-dealing of the Trump era, something that's quite unifying in the Democratic Party. I know you have a big day of events in Virginia today, but I was wondering about another piece that's national news but has impacted people in Virginia, which is Elon Musk. I mean, Virginia has one of the largest populations of federal workers. As a resident of Arlington, it's so many people who live in my community of any state in the country, and many people who are still reeling from the impact of the Doge-led destruction that he led in the beginning of the administration. Today, he's about to launch the largest IPO in history with his company, SpaceX. And I just wonder how you reflect on those two facts being true at the same time.
I think it just speaks to the corruption and the self-dealing of the Trump administration, right? In the earliest days, when he brought in Elon Musk with no experience in government or in public service, who thought it was, funny or whatever to get up on stage with a chainsaw saying you're cutting government, right? Like, and what is government, right? This is the federal agencies that go after bank robbers or transnational criminal organizations or sex traffickers. This is the folks who ensure that your loved one gets their Social Security check. It's the scientists who get ahead of the next pandemic. It's the USDA folks who ensure and work to ensure the success of agricultural advancements in our country. I mean, the list goes on. And the fact that you had a man like Elon Musk just come in and talk about public service in a way where he degraded it, and then importantly, cast aside summarily firing and disrespecting federal employees, public servants, Virginia did bear an incredible brunt of that. Many Virginians lost their jobs, but also lost the mission that they believe in and the service that they've rendered. And so, to continue to see someone like him who's only ever self-dealt and only ever kind of focused on his next thing, in the private sector, the success that he does or doesn't create, that's his. But to think that this is the same person that the Trump administration sort of brought in, I guess, as some sort of reward because he'd been such a campaign sponsor, just allowed him to wreak havoc. It speaks to the moment that we're in. It speaks to the way this administration works. But, it's no different than the fact that you've got a president who sends his son-in-law and his kids out all over the world to make these billion-dollar deals and get rich, while Americans are suffering, while gas prices are going up, while a war is not ending, and while the American people, some of whom believed in him, many of whom did not, are still continuing to suffer and bear the brunt of that.
I still, of course, live in Washington and live right outside of Washington. You're here in Richmond, but you spent so many years working as a public servant, working in the national security space. And if you walk by the White House now, you have this monstrosity that has been built to host a UFC fight on the South Lawn that is also being sponsored by a range of private sector companies. If it were written into a script about politics, nobody would believe it.
That's right.
And I think about this because every day I walked into the White House, I was still in awe of the building and the history. And I just wonder, as you're sitting here, you're leading a state and you see what is happening in the institution that you work for, what goes through your head?
I think it's, you bring up the UFC fight. It's just disappointing. And probably many other words to describe it. You know, you worked in the national security and the diplomacy space at State Department. I was at CIA. And to be an American overseas, to be a representative of the U.S. government, to be working to support our nation's safety and security, meant that people looked at the United States with reverence, with gratitude, because of our history of being a stable actor, a loyal partner. And the place where, and this is the 250th year, right, since our Declaration of Independence, an example for the rest of the world on what is possible when you build a nation based on ideas. And so the reality that there's going to be a UFC fight at the White House to celebrate our 250th, it's a disconnect for me that I just think is a sad lesson for our kids. And certainly I invite anyone to turn their attention towards Virginia, not to offend others from other places, but our slogan this year is America Made in Virginia. And we're going to be having events across Virginia that make clear what is our history, our shared history, built on ideas, and the good and the bad and everything in between about the birth of our nation. But to have a sort of a callous president who makes it all about himself and not about the history and the people who built up our nation, who believed in something so much bigger than themselves to create the United States of America, and then to work to perfect it year after year, which is a constant iterative process. I think it's a sad reality, but I think there are also other places to look, whether it's in local celebrations or local communities or local leaderships across the country of people who are actually doing that work of trying to ever perfect a unique nation.
We're just months away from Democrats potentially taking back the House, maybe even the Senate, an institution you worked in for a while. How do you see the balance of accountability for what we've seen take place? Elon Musk could be a part of that, the wheeling and dealing, the money that's been made, the corruption, so many things, and the work of governing and getting bills passed for the American people. What would you advise your old colleagues on that?
I think that accountability is extraordinarily important because, frankly, what the Trump administration, both this time and the first time, really endeavored to do is deplete people's faith in government, in public service, in the people who work in government. The sort of notion where if they make it seem like everybody's doing what they're doing, then people just turn away. And so it is incredibly important that every legislative effort they undertake be focused on addressing the needs of the people of our country. And in doing so, they must continue to do the work of holding congressional hearings and accountability so that people understand clearly what has happened under this administration. The kind of overarching theme of my response to the State of the Union was is he working for you? And so you do need the clarity of accountability through congressional hearings to make clear, if he's not working for you, who is he working for? What sort of corruption is kind of permeating throughout his administration? And then you need to do the counterpoint of showing that you, if you're elected to Congress or the Senate, or if you're a governor or a state legislator, that you are working for people. And so those two things have to go hand in hand. And so I would hope that people recognize that balance, it's not in conflict, it actually goes hand in hand. You need the accountability so that then the counterpoint, when you are working for people and working to deliver for them and be responsive to their needs, that they can see that.
Okay, we've got to take a very quick break, but here's another live look at the Kennedy Center where we are watching for a construction crew under court order to take Donald Trump's name off that building. It has to happen tonight, and we're going to be watching very closely. And up next, we're going to talk about Donald Trump's plans to steal the next election and how Democrats can beat him anyways with Governor Abigail Spanberger. We'll be right back. Donald Trump and his administration are going to extreme lengths to try and sow doubt in our elections. We talk about this a lot on this show. I mean, we've seen them launch investigations in Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and now we're even seeing it in Ohio, a state Trump has won 3 times. According to new reporting from here at MSNOW, FBI agents just raided the Cleveland offices of a pro-democracy organization that helps register voters. Agents also fanned out all across the state, showing up at the homes of the group's leaders and staff members, carrying some subpoenas and seeking information and electronic devices. One board member of the organization described it as just straight-up intimidation tactics. And in addition to those straight-up intimidation tactics, the other key piece of Trump's midterm strategy is to just draw more Republican House seats. That's been part of his strategy for some time now. And thanks to Trump allies in Republican majority state houses, as well as the conservative majority on the Supreme Court, Republicans have been able to do just that. The Democratic effort to counter that power grab has had mixed results. I mean, in California, voters decided to enact a new map that would potentially give Democrats up to 5 more House seats. And in Virginia, with the strong backing of Governor Abigail Spanberger, they did the same thing. They let the voters decide, and the voters decided to pass a new map too. But then the Virginia map was, of course, struck down by the state Supreme Court. When I sat down with the governor today, we talked about the redistricting fight in her state, what she thinks about it, her optimism that Democrats could still win back a number of the Republican-held seats in areas of the state she won when she ran for governor, and where things go after the midterm elections.
After months of campaigning for this redistricting amendment, working to make sure that Virginians understood what it was about, understood why I was supporting it, understood why it was important, there was, a moment of anger, disappointment, name your emotion, and now we have to pivot towards November because the redistricting the maps are not in place. The redistricting didn't go through despite everyone's, aggressive campaigning and support and work because of the Supreme Court of Virginia. And so now we need to focus on winning. And I come at this with a mentality that, I thought that redistricting was important, that temporary responsive redistricting, in response to what started in Texas and continued across other Republican states. But the most important thing is winning those seats. And when I first ran for Congress back in 2018, the first Trump midterm, I ran in a strong Republican seat, a district that hadn't elected a Democrat since 1968, a district my predecessor had won in 2016 by 15 points, and I swung it 17 points to win, right at 2 points. And so I say that because we can win at least 2 seats, I would argue 4 seats within Virginia, and they are worth working for to win. Just in November last year, when I won for governor, I won 2 of the congressional seats, the lines of the congressional seats. And so while I know people face so much disappointment regarding redistricting, I do too, I think my role is to remind people that the redistricting was a valuable response, but it was not the only path towards winning. It wasn't required to win. It will be hard, but we can win the 1st district, the 2nd district, the 5th district, and the 6th district. And I mean, the 9th district would be a great bonus as well. And so I want people to spend the next many months focused on that because if people are running campaigns that are responsive to their constituents, we can win, particularly now where all of the impacts of this administration, right? If you live in a community where your hospital might be closing or closing its labor and delivery unit, hold that incumbent responsible. Elect someone who wants to work on issues that matter to you. And so I could go on and on for this. So I'll stop because I feel passionate about it. No, we got to win.
I know you do. And you did win in a difficult district. And I also think, and this again goes to kind of the view of governing and how you view your role as governor, because there's so much anger, I don't have to tell you, in this country, and frustration about the other side, Republicans, Trump, and others in the country, trying to rig the rules and mess with people's ability to have their voice heard. So I think it's important for our people to understand. So if you look to 2028 and you get through the 2026 election, and let's say some of those seats are won. I mean, we see where the electorate is in the country. But then you have the Republicans gutting more seats in the South. So you're going to have additional pressure again on you to do more, to go back, right, I think, to the legislature and do it again. But why wouldn't that be a priority? Are there other priorities you think are higher than that? How do you see it as your role as governor?
So I think I'm very bullish on the idea that the Democrats are going to win the majority in the House. Now, to be clear, if we do all of the things right? Mm-hmm. If we work hard and if we leave no stone unturned, and if we recognize that every seat is a competitive seat, regardless of the historical voting record. Because we are in a unique time. A president who said no wars has us in a war with Iran. Gas prices are through the roof. Prices continue to climb, highest inflation in multiple years. If you live in a rural or agricultural community, your hospitals are potentially closing, your health clinics are closing, your diesel prices are up, your costs are up on farms, your input costs are up, you're losing your markets. It is a tough time for a lot of Americans and a lot of Virginians. And if people are out there endeavoring to understand what is actually making the lives of their fellow Virginians or Americans harder, there is real opportunity to be that voice. And so when we win in November of 26, the expectation that I have of everybody who flips a seat is that they go to Washington and they show what it is to represent communities back home, whether it's seats we flip here in the Commonwealth of Virginia or anywhere else in the country. Because I do believe that, I'm a Democrat because I think our policies are better and stronger for people, for families, for kids, for businesses, for farmers. And we have to continue to make that case, particularly at a time when there is a president who is reckless, chaotic, hurting people, whether it's in education or healthcare or on the farm. And when we make that argument, and when we govern well, we can continue to build out a broad coalition, because that's what the Democratic Party is. It is a big tent party. It should be a big tent party. And across the country, I think there is a yearning for people to be seen and to be heard. And that is the role of every candidate, whether they're an incumbent or a challenger, to take up that mantle and to work on delivering. And then, in 2028, of course, it's essential that we win the presidency. And I think we'll have an array of good candidates, but importantly, ones that are really kind of deeply connected to the challenges that Americans are feeling.
Governor Abigail Spanberger, thank you for taking the time out of a very busy day for you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
For more of my interview with Governor Abigail Spanberger, where we talked about her legislative agenda in Virginia, why she's vetoed some bills, what she still wants to do moving forward, and how she sees her role as a mom of kids she's raising currently in the governor's mansion. We're going to post that all on YouTube. Tune in for that a little later this evening. Okay, as I mentioned, we're keeping a close eye on the Kennedy Center, where Donald Trump's name will be ripped off the building tonight by midnight. And somehow, the court loss that made that happen wasn't even his biggest court loss of the day. The other one had to do with his slush funds. And our friend Glenn Kirshner was in the courtroom for that one. He called it an absolute smack. All day, Americans have been eagerly awaiting the moment that Trump's name finally gets stripped off the Kennedy Center. Believe me, I drive by the Kennedy Center all the time. I can't wait myself. So this was the crowd that gathered outside of the Kennedy Center this morning to watch as workers set up scaffolding to strip Trump's name from the building. Online, literally millions of people, we've talked about this already, watched live streams for hours, which is remarkable, given the big action they were watching was basically scaffolding being built. Now, in person, there were cheers, there was a drag queen, there were bubbles. Who says D.C. isn't fun? We have lots of fun people here. It looked like quite the party. And there to celebrate her victory was Democratic Congresswoman from Ohio, Joyce Beatty. You see, the reason any of this is really happening today is because Joyce Beatty is on the board of the Kennedy Center. And when Trump's new appointees to that board added his name to the center, she sued, arguing that legally an act of Congress was required to rename the building. And last month, a judge agreed with her, saying, quote, Congress gave the Kennedy Center its name and only Congress can change it. The judge ordered Trump's name be stripped from the building by tonight. And yesterday, the Trump-appointed leadership at the Kennedy Center tried to get that decision paused. Then this morning, the judge denied that request, saying Trump's name had to go. And then this afternoon, after the scaffolding had been built and workers were ready to start peeling off Trump's name, the Trump-appointed leadership at the Kennedy Center tried again. They appealed the decision. Tonight, that appeal was rejected. And I kid you not, Moments after that final appeal was rejected, a literal rainbow appeared across the Kennedy Center. A double rainbow, actually. Here's Congresswoman Joyce Beatty embracing that magical moment. There she is. She looks pretty freaking happy for good reason. And now tonight, we, along with a growing in-person crowd and millions more people online, we're not just watching the scaffolding get built. We're waiting for the moment Trump's name gets torn off that wall. Joining me now to discuss this and many other things is Glenn Kirshner, a former federal prosecutor and the host of the Justice Matters podcast. Okay. There are 3 million people, if not more, who have tuned in to watch the MSNOW live stream. That tells you something about how much people care about this. So tell us, at this point, 2 hours and 20 minutes from midnight, are there any legal avenues left for Trump at this point? Or is this the end of the road for him as it comes to his name on the Kennedy Center?
You know, it seems like it's the end of the legal road, Jen. And the only question is, will Donald Trump's executive branch comply with the order to remove his name from the Kennedy Center, or will he play a game of chicken and see how the court responds, knowing that the court doesn't exactly have a law enforcement agency of its own to enforce its orders? It does have the U.S. Marshal Service, which by law is required, is obligated to enforce federal court orders. But we all know the Marshal Service is part of the executive branch in the Department of Justice. So, you know, I hope and I expect we'll see those letters begin to come off before midnight. But, you know, with Trump and his administration, you know, it's anyone's guess.
I love the perfect way to describe it. There's no more legal avenues, but we just got to be clear-eyed here about what they're capable of. Okay, so today, a different judge issued an equally, or if not more, brutal ruling against President Trump, indefinitely blocking his slush fund. I mentioned this earlier, but you were in court for that ruling. What can you tell us about the tenor of the judge's ruling?
I can only describe it, Jen, as a legal smackdown by Judge Brinkema of DOJ, Todd Blanche, and Donald Trump's $1.8 billion so-called weaponization fund. You know, she really kind of figuratively grabbed hold of the lone DOJ attorney who was at counsel table, somebody named Andrew Block, and looking at his LinkedIn profile, he has been at the Department of Justice ever since May of 2026. So nobody can accuse him of being a veteran DOJ attorney. And he didn't even get to make his argument. The first thing Judge Brinkema said is, you know, you were in court 2 days ago across the river in Judge Leon's courtroom, and Judge Leon asked you the question, why hasn't Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche rescinded the agreement to create the weaponization fund, which would mean it would be legally dead and it couldn't be revived? And you told Judge Leon, I don't have an answer to that question. Didn't you go back and ask either Todd Blanche or your direct supervisor to get an answer to that question? Because I need an answer to that question. And she said, and she was incredulous when he said, Your Honor, I still don't have an answer to that question. And so whereas Judge Leon 2 days ago declined to enter a temporary restraining order and put basically a stop work order in place on the weaponization fund, he said, don't play possum on me, DOJ. Well, you know what, Judge Brinkema was not going to give DOJ the opportunity to play possum. She was not at all satisfied that there was any evidence of record that DOJ would not move forward whenever it saw fit with the weaponization fund. So she put a preliminary injunction in place, and she did give DOJ the opportunity 1 week. And she said, if Todd Blanche and the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, sign a sworn declaration that they have rescinded the agreement that created the weaponization fund and that it is legally dead and cannot be resurrected, I will revisit my ruling. But as of right now, there is a stop work order, a preliminary injunction in place. And, you know, she was clearly not going to play games or listen to any Todd Blanche doublespeak.
So helpful rundown there. Quickly before we let you go, again, this is, I guess, again, a legal question, of course. They've been scheming. I mean, there's been reporting that the Justice Department is still scheming behind the scenes. I suspect they are, right, on how to revive it. What could they do?
Well, now they're going to have to fish or cut bait. They're either going to have to file these sworn declarations. And I can't tell you, Jen, how many times Judge Brinkham has said, I want these things signed under the penalties of perjury by Todd Blanche and by Scott Besson. So either they're going to provide what the judge has asked for, and then she'll reconsider whether the issue really is moot because there's no legal possibility for the fund to be revived, and maybe dismiss the case as moot, or they won't. And then, as far as I can see, the litigation will just continue through the system with the preliminary injunction, the stop work order remaining in place. But I can tell you, Judge Brinkham clearly don't play.
We love a judge who doesn't play in this time, day, and age. Glenn Kirshner, thank you for being here with me on a Friday. It's always great to talk to you.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay, coming up, Bernie Sanders is headed to New York to campaign with Zohran Mamdani and a slate of candidates he just endorsed. And that is very relevant news for the person I'm about to talk to, who also has his own slew of endorsements. We'll be right back.